All right, guys. Can you believe we are in week 7? You have 2 assignments left. That is it. And then hallelujah, winter break, and everything gets to kind of relax just a little bit, which is great. I am on my husband's computer, not exactly sure how to work this, so be patient with me, but I think we're going to be okay. I'm going to try to share some items with you. We're going to go pretty quickly tonight because it's just 2:01 AWN. Sorry, it wants a password. I don't understand what's happening. Hold on. Oh, someone's there. Hold on. Okay, I think we're through all the technology chaos. So before we get going too far into all of this, I wanted to hop on and look at some of the discussions. Some of you have already figured out that even though to see other people's discussions, you have to post a prompt first. You've started posting, then you read other people's things, and then you go back in and add to it or expound on someone else's insight because now you're like, oh, I forgot about that. That is the right thing to do. That is the right way to do it. Maybe it was in week 5. Sorry, I should have looked at this. Yes, a topic that you felt like was really important. A lot of you talked about inclusion and multicultural education. I loved how you numbered things and read things off because you helped us look through the information in a new light and in a new way. I am going to stop sharing just for a minute. And those of you that are on the call, I want you to unmute and I want you to talk to me about this book right here. I will tell you in mine, it is highlighted, it is dog-eared, it is underlined. There are so many pieces of this book that I take away and I just go, this has to be communicated to other educators in the field, and I need to implement it every time that I can. So let me give you a minute to kind of get your mind together. Erica's joining us here. Hi, Tori. Did you say hi to you, sweetie? Erica, we're looking at this book, the Don't Look Away, and just sharing anything that we've highlighted, underlined, something that really stood out to us so that our peers, maybe if they missed it, something else. But I would love to hear a few insights. I'll save mine for the end. So look at your stuff and share when you have something. All right, give me something. Anything you underlined, highlighted, anything. Read it straight out of the book.
Are we
Tell
doing
us
this
what page
from
was on.
this week or just like in general?
No, just in
Okay.
general. Complete overall everything.
So I liked when we were when it went over ACEs, how it mentioned specific kind of challenges that like what direct effect they have on kids. And one of the quotes was that children who experience 4 or more ACEs are likely to have significant health challenges in life, including heart disease, diabetes, autoimmune abnormalities, and many more. Because it's not just trauma, right? So it's having a neurological and physiological impact on students. So it's something we have to keep in mind, especially when we have students who have trauma, that it's going to impact every aspect of their life and academics, including.
Love that. Love that extra layer. And just a reminder, ACEs are those adverse childhood experiences. They can range anything from having to move a whole bunch of times to losing a family member to losing a house in a fire, like anything that happened to a child that was just out of the kid's ability to control or stop or manage, and something they probably shouldn't be exposed to at that age. We also want to live in a place where we don't let an ACE score determine a student's ability or how far they'll be able to go or what they can manage. We do, like Erica said, want to be aware that those ACE scores have impacts on not only their mental and ability to absorb academic things, but socially and physically. She read off that list. So these kiddos are up against a lot. All right, excellent. Thanks for starting us off, Erica. Give me a couple more, guys.
Also for me, I know that like to piggyback on Erica as well too, like because I know I have a lot of students now where the school I teach at who deal with all that stuff now. And then also with the another one that caught my eye was the white privilege and institutional racism deal as well, because I know like firsthand that I dealt with that like back when I was in school, you know, a little bit. And then also just seeing like different interactions with some students and their teachers dealing with stuff like that. And it's just like, oh man, like just it's just seeing like you know, you hear all the stories, you hear all the things, but until you experience it like firsthand, you just like, oh wow, like you're really shocked by it and just, you know, and to know how to properly like deal with things like that. So like those really like caught my eye for sure in this book.
Yeah, Isaiah, you bring up like on page 44 and 45, where at the top of 45 it says most teachers are not intentionally engaging in racist acts towards individual students, but something's fueling this legacy of racism. And Isaiah, you pointed out that not only have you been a person to receive it, but you've seen it in action. And now, hopefully, through this book and this course and other pieces, you're able to be an advocate for making others aware of that legacy of racism. That, hey, you may not realize this, but when you mispronounce that student's name, or when you say, I'm just going to call you this, you're actually really degrading who they are, their identity, their value, their culture, everything. Just because they have brown skin doesn't mean they speak Spanish. Like those kind of things that people just do. And man, they just aren't aware. And we want to approach them with grace, but we also want to approach them with an expectation of change because you're aware now. There's no going back. We've all been there. Thank you, Isaiah. One last one. Anybody else?
On page 44, it kind of talks about like the system in general, like white kids and white children are like already have that privilege, and black children and other children of color are playing catch up from the start due to discrimination, bias, and a legacy of racism. I have that. That's just something that I had noticed, and it kind of helps me understand. You know, like sometimes I need to take a step back and realize, like, you know, like I have had it, like I've had it pretty easy, and it's a way for me to, like, you know, kind of remember that I do have that privilege, and not everyone's the same. You can't lump people together. Everyone's an individual. So that's just something that I'd had.
Love it. Caitlin, did you have something? If not, it's okay.
Well, I was just thinking, like, from this week, I didn't really know what to say about it, because just like reading the adultification bias, like that was something that really stood out to me, because it's a very interesting bias that I've definitely seen before. And it's just kind of like one of those, like, but why is it a thing? Like, it's still a child, you know what I mean? So that one was just like really hard to read also, but like just sad.
It is, and it's good that you're like, but wait, why would that happen? And yet other children are watching educators who, when a little black girl falls down, they say, now get up, now here we go. And a little white girl falls in there, oh, you okay? We're actually teaching children to be biased towards that person. It's okay, Tori. I'm sorry your video is not working. It's all right. To piggyback on what Hunter said too, on page 51, it says, engaging in culturally relevant pedagogy entails more than just adopting certain instructional practices and making sure your teaching materials are racially and ethnically diverse. That's a great place to start for some people. But what Hunter was saying was there has to be this decision to be active in how we are interacting, approaching, responding to, and supporting students from all different backgrounds. So thank you guys so much for participating in that, because I want to make sure you are understanding how beautiful this book is. If you're not absolutely in this thing, highlighting and doing everything else, you're really doing yourself a disservice. So I do want to jump into the fact that in week 6, so we've heard a lot about uh, CRT, right? And a lot of the debates and things are going on. The danger in using acronyms is that sometimes we're coming at it from 2 different places. And if you remember from this text, CRT, what I just read about, culturally responsive teaching, that has to happen. It has to. And there are some people out there who want to take an acronym or an idea and just put a blanket on everything and say, we can't talk about this anymore. Well, wait a minute. You are talking about A, I'm talking about B, and we cannot throw the baby out with the bathwater on this one, because critical race theory, that's the CRT everybody talks about. That would never be taught in schools. That's taught in like law school. Okay. If you read is it 1918 Project and all those, I've read enough of it to realize it is way over my head. Hi, honey. And it's got, and we want to make sure that people are saying that CRT, it's making me feel guilty for being white. Okay, A, you should feel guilty. B, you're stupid. Let's talk for just a minute. Now, I would never tell someone they're stupid. I'm being 100% facetious with you. Please, please, please hear me, okay? I'm not saying we should blame anyone. This isn't about blame. This is about awareness and action. This is about culturally responsive teaching. And that's what I want us to focus on. Not so much the critical race theory, that's totally different thing. So when people say CRT, I would love for you guys to say, oh, do you mean culturally responsive teaching? And they go, yeah, that's what oh yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. I love that idea, because we've looked at the prison pipeline and we've looked at this and the ACE scores. Oh yeah, and you can just make them feel really good about themselves while secretly calling them stupid. Okay, so anyway, we don't call people stupid. That's an ugly word. We don't do that. Oh, Tori, did you really want to share one of your parts? Go ahead, audio, unmute or chat. It's okay if you don't have video, please. Did not mean to
I'm
cut you
gonna
off.
join on my phone too here in a minute so I can have video. But I was back in chapter 1 when they were talking about like the inequalities in like preschools. I'm from a really small district, and so like they get preschool, 2 hours a day, 2 days a week, and just the difference. I taught first grade of students that had like full like private preschool where they were getting more curriculum and more prep versus social. Just the difference there and the availability for preschool some places.
Great takeaway. And I love that you're applying it to where you are, unfortunately. There are some pieces of curriculum that actually have different pass rates for children from minority groups versus white children. We actually have curriculum who put children in a box and say, you know what, if you can just get 70%, that'll be great. Oh, but you need to get 90%. What just happened? Why did we lower that bar? And actually that leads us into, thank you, Tori, for sharing. That leads us into what we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. Please let this work. Oh, it worked. Okay, we're going to jump to week 7. Give me a nod if you can see my screen. Yes, Blackboard, we're seeing that. Okay, beautiful. You have already answered your prompts for your discussions. If you haven't yet, you need to do that right away. Oh, whoops, I'm in the wrong place. Here we go. Week 7. Remember, when you get into the week, you always want to go to the overview, because that's going to tell you exactly what you're supposed to read. There it is. Ornstein chapter 14, Iruka chapter 4, and it's going to tell you what outcomes you should be looking for. So get your brain ready to go. You should see a word here repeated over and over again. You ready? Curriculum. Curriculum, curriculum, curriculum. Curriculum is what we teach. Pedagogy is how we teach it. So when you read books like there's a great blog, I should say, that's called Cult of Pedagogy. If you haven't followed her before, she's amazing. But we want to make sure that we are actually looking at curriculum through a different lens. So if you click here on the learning resources folder and you go here, you guys, you can't watch maybe every one of these videos, but please click on them just for a minute to hear a little of it. This one right here, A Tale of Two Teachers, amazing. She speaks from it as a student. She actually says in there that one of her teachers saddled up next to her when she was in elementary school and said, you know, you're really smart for a Black girl. And she was like, wait, what just it? And the teacher actually ended up apologizing, but I don't think she really understood that added phrase that she put in there, put that there was some sort of level or limit to what this young girl should have been able to accomplish because of her skin color and her cultural identification, and that should never happen. So we also have this I mean, you guys, all of these are amazing. I love this one about educational systems and cultural competencies. Here's your ELL piece. You're going to need that ELL piece. If you don't work with ELLs a lot, I really want you to watch that one for your assignment this week. Here's some cultural awareness pieces. This can give you great ideas for your assignment this week. And here's a great presentation from this guy about 3 types of curriculum. Actually, she mentions it here in A Tale of Two Teachers as well. And this is tested or evaluated curriculum, the 2 different ones between that. The reason all this is important is because in your textbook, in chapter 14 of our Orenstein textbook, it talks about directed instruction model, and it talks about how there's 2 different types of curriculum. There's subject-centered and they're student-centered. So you want to make sure that you're saying, okay, is the curriculum based on the subject being taught, math, science, history, whatever it is, or the students being taught? There are pros and cons to each. There are different ways to implement them. So you're going to want to go to chapter 14 of your Orenstein text and make sure you look for the headings that have all of that in it to go, okay, do I understand what it means to be student-centered? Do I understand what it means to be subject-centered? Do I understand direct instruction model, John Dewey's 5 major approaches, Rousseau and childhood self-expression? All of that's going to make sense to you. I have my notes here that I'm working off of. There are 21st century skills. There's 4 of them listed in 14-3D. Focus on that process that's there, not the content. So it develops skills along with rigorous curriculum. There's technology added to enhance instruction. 14-4 talks about the curriculum trends. So it's all about curriculum this week. You should have already looked at this article here about collaborative partnerships with culturally diverse families. You needed that for your discussion, I believe. But let's jump to the assignment this week. It is a template, but within the template, you are going to use citations. Citations can happen in 2 different ways. They can be narrative or they can be in text. And if you look at the very beginning of this class, I put a video together that shows you exactly how to do those 2 things. So you're going to want to go back and watch that video if you haven't already. You're going to provide a reference page. Here's the weird thing. Your title page, your template, and your reference page are all going to be landscape. It is okay. Do not try to move things around. You will mess this whole thing up. Don't do it. All right, let's move into this. So the directions tell you to think back through our entire course, the whole thing, and think about how curriculum approach is delivered, assessed, and the resources utilized within each kind of curriculum that are covered. Focus on the issues and the terms that are outlined in your text. The table that you're going to see in your template here is loosely based on the text in chapter 14, but especially in overview 14.1 graphics. You're going to want to look at that. Don't just look at the graphic, you need to understand the content. So when you look at your, try to get this here, template, you see, okay, here's a curriculum approach, subject area. That's one kind of curriculum. You ready? You're going to take that one curriculum and you're going to answer what type of bias could possibly occur within this approach or should be addressed. Are you wondering what biases to do? Well, I am so glad you asked. This little book right here. If I look in the index and I look up bias, oh my word, they're all listed right there. Adultification, age, appearance, class, controlling, disability, ethnic, explicit, implicit, gender, racial. I better read about one of these. one at least. So in subject area, I'm just making this up. Gender bias could occur because, and you give me a little explanation. Don't you just be listening. You got to give me a list and you got to give me an explanation for it. Okay, now let's stay with subject area. You ready? I'm still in subject area approach. Issue 1, what type of bias? Issue 2, how could cultural awareness or empathy be supported or disregarded within this approach? Because listen, see how it says subject-centered? These 4 are subject-centered. If they're totally subject-centered, could they possibly disregard culture and not leave space for that, or get rid of any sort of empathy because it's so driven by task and subject? I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying you have to be positive with everything. You have to show that you know what you are talking about. Finally, with the third one, and I can't get it to move over, would English language learners benefit from this approach? Yes, no, why? You have to know ELLs to answer this question. So you might want to look in the index or the glossary of the Orenstein text and read up on some ELL things. There have been multiple videos throughout each of the weeks about ELLs. There are people in your class who are brilliant with ELLs. In fact, they're an ELL teacher. So it's not their job to carry you, but if you want to discuss with them about things, perhaps they can give you some background about ELLs that you could use to answer this template. So you're going to provide evidence-based support for your responses when appropriate. You're not always going to need this, but when you're talking about the bias, what should you probably be citing? This. When you're talking about cultural awareness, maybe. When you're talking about ELLs, maybe you're talking about our textbook, maybe you're talking about a video. Respond to each issue by clearly identifying elements or responses appropriate within the curriculum approach, and provide a reference page. Reference page has to be double-spaced, hanging indent, and in alphabetical order, and correctly formatted. If you're going out and finding some citation generator and you're choosing MLA instead of APA, or maybe it doesn't know that it's a website versus a book, you got to make sure you put everything in correctly. So don't just blame the citation generator. So let's look at the rubric really quickly. You'll notice that within that first issue, which is that first column, it's saying explicit, clear identification of bias within all 8 approaches, 8 curriculum approaches. A description. See, that's where you'll, well, the directions didn't say to say why. Oh, okay, maybe it didn't really clearly, but the rubric did. So you need to look at both of those so that you have everything that we need. Again, while this bias isn't guaranteed to occur, you're just sharing your insight of what could possibly happen. Within issue 2, explicit, clear identification for how cultural awareness or empathy are either supported or not, and description provided. And there's an articulation of possible cultural empathy issues. Within issue 3, clear and explicit explanation regarding how all 8 impact ELL students. Would they limit them? Would they make them feel like they don't belong? Would they support them? Would they provide a great environment? How would it work? Finally, within writing APA, your tile page is correctly formatted. Your phrases are purposeful and clear, even if complete sentences aren't used. I want you to notice that. You don't have to write a double-spaced long paragraph, but you just need to have clear statements there. All cells are filled out completely, 12-point Times New Roman font, no major spelling or grammar errors. Okay, before I move on, questions about week 7 assignment. Anybody? We good? Wow, I answered all the questions. It's a miracle. All right, glorious.
Actually, can you just do an example of the student-centered like curriculum, what you're kind of looking for regarding that?
Where's
Where
what do
it's
you
like
mean?
the understood
Oh,
centered
well,
curriculum?
they're all exactly the same.
Okay.
So within activity-centered curriculum, what bias could be there? Would it provide culture? I mean, it's all the same, but the idea is those 4 curriculum types are what we would consider student-centered
Okay.
versus the 4 at the top that are considered subject-centered. And that should shift a little bit in your mind as to how maybe you're going to respond to issue 2 for cultural awareness and empathy to be supported or not. Does that help? Good question.
Yeah, that helps.
There's nothing like super specific that, again, this is not a right or a wrong. It's showing mastery of content. If you've read your stuff, this should not be difficult. If you haven't read it, if you phoned it in, if you don't own these books, if you're not actually taking time to get to know the content, it's going to be real clear, unfortunately, because you just can't fake it with this stuff. This is not a fill in the blank assignment. All right, we're going to jump to week 8 because I don't want you to be overwhelmed when you look at the final assignment, because actually you've done a lot of it in week 3 already. However, because we are talking about reform and intentional classrooms and all those things, again, we have some video isn't available. Okay, I'll go check that one out this week. Glad we looked at it. If you've ever wondered what the flipped classroom model is like, watch these videos. Might give you a great idea for how you want to teach. There are some great videos in here to give you insight and maybe some language to articulate what you already knew you wanted to say. So you need to understand that most of this you've already written in week 3. You're going to want to go back and look at any insights and comments that I left you there. So in week 3, you created a statement concerning educational theory and philosophy. This week, we're going to build on those elements and apply them to areas studied between weeks 4 and 8. You're going to take your document from week 3, you're going to pull it over, and you're going to add the elements, terms, and strategies that are outlined within each section. When your paper is done, the following headings should be there: introduction, philosophy, theory, bias, culture and connection, curriculum and reform, conclusion. I should not have 2 conclusions. If in your introduction in week 3, you didn't actually identify a learning theory, you identified maybe a theory of education because you were just confused about it. No problem. This is your time to fix it. Look at my comments, fix things. So in your introduction, look what it says: review the learning theory that you chose. No need to change or edit unless comments were left in week 3, or you've determined to adopt a different learning theory. But you ready? Here's what you're going to add. Add an introduction to your personal implicit bias or anything you've discovered about yourself regarding the knowledge you gained from the Aruka text. Introduce us to terms or issues you did not know about or better understand. This is why that discussion post from week 5 is so great to go back to if other people brought up something, you're like, oh, I forgot about that. Anything you highlighted or underlined in here, but I do want you to be honest with me about, you know what? I realized I actually have an implicit bias toward, or I realized I have a tendency towards, or I was brought up to think, or my schooling. Okay, it can go both ways, folks. It is not just about people who are working with minority students, but instead minority teachers who are maybe being put into new positions where they're working with students who don't look like them or a new learning environment. Philosophy of education, you're going to review. If all is well, nothing needs to be edited or changed. Oh, look. Add information from course sources describing how your chosen philosophy supports inclusive learning. So do you see how we're just taking it one more extra layer? So really, you're probably going to add about 3 or 4 sentences here. That's it. And you're going to change anything else that needed to change. Theory of education, reacquaint yourself with it, make any adjustments. Oh, but look at this. Nothing to add here. Moving on. Bias. This is new content. You should not have this heading in your paper. This new content should utilize citations from ASCD articles and Aruka. Okay, I've already given you the 2 sources that you need to go to, or actually there's like 4 or 5. There's a bunch of them. Provide focused, succinct responses to the areas listed. All right. There was, I think it was in week 2, there's an acronym called the meal plan, and it like kind of walks you through how to write a paragraph so that you stay on task and you have your main idea, you have your evidence, you have all those pieces. So here are the 3 areas you're going to cover in your bias heading: awareness of bias, types of bias, creating an anti-bias classroom. You're going to want to look at 2 to 3 sentences for each of those, and you should be good. Not a paragraph for each, but just 2 or 3 sentences. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Questions so far?
So for the bias piece, it'll end up being more like a paragraph or two instead of like,
Bingo. Because bias is your heading. And so within that heading, you're going to need to make sure you clearly cover the 3 areas. So see how it says, how does awareness of bias help educators reach all students? What does it take to acquire awareness? Why isn't this a given within social and educational circles? Remember in the Aruka text, it talked about awareness right at the beginning, about why it's so difficult for some people to understand that they perpetuate this kind of prejudiced behavior and racially motivated responses to things. Great question, Erica. Yes, we are not looking for 3 paragraphs here. We're looking for a hefty paragraph that covers those 3 areas. Sweet, here we go. Stop me if you have any other questions. Culture and connection. This is new content. This was not in week 3. This new content requires you to have a clear understanding of the cultures represented in your classroom and community. Remember that analysis that we did? The analysis, part 1 and part 2. Oh my goodness, you have already done the work. Isn't it glorious? Reviewing the analysis of diversity within your environment, reflect on how this impacts student learning. Provide explicit examples. You can't just, well, we all just kind of hang out. Everybody looks the same. Nope. Explicit examples for how historical treatment of the cultural groups in your area still impact student learning. Even if you don't have something or you're not in a school, you are in a community where you can see how people treat each other. Pull from that and bring something here that we can use. Articulate strategies, programs, or ideas for helping schools connect with families from other cultures. Focus on the article and text from week 7 regarding how to collaborate with it. See, you're doing that right now. The 4 E's outlined in the Aruka text in chapter 7 will provide more examples and options for embracing culture and connecting with families in your community. So it tells you where to look. So don't feel like you have to reinvent the wheel or come up with some huge original diatribe. Nope, stick with what's being asked here, okay? Curriculum and reform. Again, this is new content. You should be looking in chapter 16 of your Ornstein text, in specifically section 16.4 and 16.5. There's an analysis there regarding your experience or perspective in response to the following prompts. Which characteristics of school reform do you feel are most difficult to enforce or implement? And which improvement approaches do you feel would be most effective regarding strategy? So once you look at the Ornstein text, skip everything else in chapter 16 except for those 2 sections. Look at them and identify the reform piece and then the improvement piece. I'm going to stop there. Any questions? Good so far. Okay. Do you see how, if you walk through it section by section, it actually isn't too bad. If you look at it all together, you're like, dear Lord, is this a 3,000 word paper? No. You're golden. You're looking at probably 6 to 8 sentences per section, honestly. If we're really being honest about it, you should be able to get what you need in there. Plus, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can read 6-page papers anymore. Okay, technology. You guys give me a run for my money, friends. Technology has become an essential and consistent resource for educators and students regarding instruction and assessment. So when formatting your response, focus on, do you remember that Reich article from week 4, curriculum items from week 7, and Ornstein text 16.6. You've got 3 sources to look at for technology. You're giving an overview concerning your perspective for how technology should be utilized, how it does or doesn't create equitable learning environments, and how it can support all students within your content area. This is where you learn to be a really good consumer of information. You go straight to that, let's say the Reich article. I don't know if that's how you say his name, Reach, right? Anyway, go to that article. You find 2 little nuggets. Like, according to Reich, Reach, whatever it is, parentheses, 2019, comma, and you say it in your own words. If I see huge block text, I'm going to literally skip them and not count that towards any of your content. Because if you have included quotes up to this point, I guarantee you, I have left a note that that should not be happening. Not at all. Unless you're writing a master's thesis or a dissertation, you should know this stuff and be able to say it in your own words. You are an absolute master of this content. Show your mastery. So you're going to provide an overview concerning your perspective for how things should be utilized, creating equitable environments, and supporting students. In your conclusion, you're going to review your initial submission from week 3. You're going to make any edits or changes, and then you're going to add, you ready? A concluding statement. So when I read statement, I think 1 to 2 sentences. That's about it. A statement regarding your commitment and desire to provide anti-bias, culturally responsive learning environments within your classroom. This is I am committed to doing the following things. This is a statement articulating how you would reimagine education and your personal commitment to address issues of inequity, bias, or historical elements creating negative or limiting experiences. This is a 250-point assignment for good reason. You are earning every one of those 250 points because this is really a culmination of what you've done for all of the past 8 weeks. And if you've done good work in week 3 and even on 4, 5, 6, 7, you've got great stuff to pull from. I'm not going to go through this rubric, but as you can see, each item is very clearly outlined with what it takes to get a meets or exceeds expectations. Just a quick reminder at the bottom, it does say sources are correctly listed in the references and sources are correctly cited within the document. You can't reference something you didn't cite, and you can't cite something you didn't reference. They are bookends to each other. Okay. Questions, thoughts, ideas, even for your peers of like, you know what, I think a great way to approach this would be like, please share with us your insight.
I appreciate that it's broken down because that makes it easier to kind of chunk it and do one thing at a time. It makes it a lot more
Good.
approachable. Not so like this doesn't feel overwhelming when you just look at it as like a paragraph or 2 per thing.
Yes. Yes, that is a great way to look at it. Remember, paragraphs have to have a minimum of 3 sentences. We shouldn't have 1 sentence hanging out there by itself. We shouldn't have anything capitalized that isn't an actual proper noun. All of those things, I've worked very, very hard to give you really clear feedback so that you can approach this 250-point assignment with a lot of confidence. Not because I've nitpicked at you or because I've somehow made the situation difficult, but because I've made you aware and I'm trying to elevate your writing. When you are with an adjunct professor, perhaps in future classes, they maybe can't give that level of feedback to you, but by being with me and having that level of awareness, it's going to become second nature to you and your writing is going to improve so much. They'll be like, oh my gosh, this is so easy to read. This is great. And then all of a sudden assignments get easier. I mean, it really is just, I know it sounds so stupid, but it's my gift to you. All right, what else? Any other questions? Okay, last thing before we shut this down and then open it up for anything else. Notice the due date. Saturday, December 10th. Always in all 8-week classes on week 8, your assignment is due on Saturday. Why? Because your next classes start on Sunday. Of course, this time they won't because you get a break. But when we come back in January, the 8 weeks, so you've got to make sure that it's in on Saturday. Set an alarm, do whatever you need to do, but make sure that happens. All right, we have covered so much. You guys have been so patient and great. Thank you for letting me share a little bit of this. This book for me was a real eye-opener, even though it's brand new. I knew a lot of the things, but I didn't have the language that it gave me to be able to articulate it to other people. So I hope it's become a really great resource for you. I think that's it. Anybody else? Questions, thoughts, comments? You good?
Thank you for breaking it down. I appreciate it.
Thanks for being here. Yeah, I hope other people can watch the video and gain support for it. But you guys, thanks for your time and energy, and have a wonderful rest of the week. You've almost made it. Finish strong, okay? You guys are awesome. I'm going to stop recording. And